Hey, greetings everybody. Gleekon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. We last left off with a romantic chapter between Arthas and Jaina as they sort of consummated their love on Hallows Eve. And that was about it. Kael'thas got a little bit in a tiff because he was jealous. He was hoping for Jaina's affections. He never got it. So stay a while and listen to this one. This is chapter 8 of Arthas, Rise of the Lich King. The palace had never been so cheerily decorated for the Feast of Wintervale as it was this year. Muradin, ever a good ambassador of his people, had brought the dwarven tradition to Lordaeron upon his arrival. Over the years, it had increased in popularity, and this year, the people seemed to truly take it to heart. One, I didn't remember that was a dwarven tradition. You can probably read that in some in-game lore. Two, here's yet another holiday. We are going to have what a long, strange trip it's been soon if we keep it up. The festival tone had been established a few weeks earlier, when Jaina had delighted them so with her theatrical display of igniting the Wicker Man. She had been granted permission to stay through the winter if she so chose, although Dalaran was not far to one who could teleport herself. Something had changed. It was both subtle and profound. Jaina Proudmoore was starting to be treated as more than the daughter of the ruler of Kul Tiras, more than a friend. She was starting to be treated as a member of the royal family. Arthas first realized it when his mother took both Jaina and Kalia to be fitted for the formal dresses fashion required for the Wintervale Eve ball. Other guests had spent Wintervale here. Leanne had never before wanted to coordinate their outfits with her own and that of her daughter. Tyrannus now often requested that Jaina join him and Arthas when they sat to listen to the people's petitions. She sat on the king's left, Arthas on his right, in a position nearly equal to the king's own son. Well, Arthas thought. He supposed that it was the logical conclusion, wasn't it? He recalled his words to Kalia years ago. We each have our duties, I guess. You to marry whomever father wants, and me to marry well for the kingdom. Jaina would be good for the kingdom. Jaina, he thought, would be good for him, too. So why did the thought make him feel so uneasy? They had fresh snow for the night before Wintervale. Arthas stood looking out of a large window at Lordimere Lake, frozen over now. The snow had begun falling at dawn and had stopped about an hour ago. The sky was black velvet, the stars small icy diamonds against the soft darkness, and moonlight made everything look still, hushed, and magical. A soft hand slipped into his. Beautiful, isn't it? Jaina said quietly. Arthas nodded, not looking at her. Plenty of ammunition. What? Ammunition? Jaina repeated. For snowball fights. He finally turned to her and his breath caught. He'd not been permitted to see the gowns she, Kalia, and his mother would be wearing to the banquet and ball this evening, and he was stunned by her beauty. Jaina Proudmoore looked like a snow maiden. From shoes that looked to be made of ice to a white gown tinged with the palest blue to the circlet of silver that caught the warm glow of the torchlight, she was heartbreakingly lovely. But she was no ice queen, no statue. She was warm and soft and alive, her golden hair flowing about her shoulders, her cheeks pink beneath his admiring gaze, her blue eyes bright with happiness. You're like a white candle, he said, all white and gold. He reached for a lock of her hair, twirling it about his fingers. She grinned. Yes, she laughed, reaching to touch his own bright locks. The children will almost certainly be blonde. He froze. Jaina? Are you? She chuckled. No, not yet, but there's no reason to think we won't be able to have children. Children. Again, the word that galvanized him in shock and peculiar distress. She was talking about the children they would have. His mind galloped into the future, a future with Jaina as his wife, their children in the palace, his parents gone, himself on the throne, the weight of the crown on his head. Part of him desperately wanted that. He loved having Jaina by his side, loved holding her in his arms at night, loved the taste and smell of her, loved her laughter, pure as a bell and sweet as the scent of roses. He loved. What if he ruined it? So this is where, he's had these little, and it might be just his own, just nature versus nurture kind of thing. He just might have this streak in him. But it takes both nature and nurture to create truly like intense pathologies, which obviously Arthas develops that. So they've shown these streaks of his nature, but you also have some events. The death of Invincible, I think, was obviously we're seeing here is a psychological blow to him because he's having that doubt. He's going to hold positivity at arm's length because he's afraid of losing it. Very understandable. Because suddenly he knew that until this moment it had all been child's play. He thought of Jaina as a companion, just as she had been since his boyhood, except their games were now of a more adult nature. But something had suddenly shifted inside him. What if this was real? What if he really was in love with her and she with him? What if he was a bad husband? A bad king? What if... "I'm not ready," he blurted, her brow furrowed. "Well, we do not have to have little ones right away." She squeezed his hand in what was clearly intended to be a gesture of reassurance. Arthas suddenly dropped her hand and took a step backward. Her frown deepened in confusion. "Arthas, what's wrong?" "Jaina, we're too young," he said, speaking rapidly, his voice rising slightly. "I'm too young. There's still... I can't... I'm not ready." She paled. "You are... I thought..." Guilt racked him. She'd asked him this the night they became lovers. "Are you ready for this?" she had whispered. "I am if you are," he had replied, and he'd meant it. He really thought he'd meant it. Arthas reached out and grabbed her hands, trying desperately to articulate the emotions racing through him. "I still have so much to learn, so much training to complete, and Father needs me. Uther's got so much he needs to teach me, and Jaina, we've always been friends. You've always understood me so well. Can't you understand me now? Can't we still be friends?" Her bloodless lips opened, but no words came out at first. Her hands were limp in his. Almost frantically, he squeezed them. "Jaina, please understand, even if I don't." "Of course, Arthas." Her voice was monotone. "We'll always be friends, you and I." Everything from her posture to her face to her voice bespoke her pain and her shock, but Arthas clung instead to her words as a wave of relief, so profound it made his knees weak, swept over him. It was all going to be just fine. He might upset her now a little, but surely she'd understand soon. They knew each other. She'd figure out that he was right, that it was too soon. "I mean, this isn't forever," he said, feeling the need to explain. "Just for now. You've got studying to do. I'm sure I've been a distraction, and tonight probably resents me." She said nothing. "This is for the best. Maybe one day it'll be different and we can try again. It's not that I don't... that you..." He pulled her into his arms and hugged her. She was stiff as stone for a moment, then he felt the tension leave her, and her arms went around him. They stood alone in the hall for a long time, Arthas resting his cheek against her bright gold hair. The hair that, no doubt, their children would indeed have been born with. Might still be born with. "I don't want to close the door," he said quietly. It's all right, Arthas. I understand." He stepped back, his hands on her shoulders, peering into her eyes. "Do you?" She laughed slightly. "Honestly, no. But it's all right. It will be eventually, anyway. I know that. Jaina, I just want to make sure this is right for both of us. I don't want to mess this up. I can't mess this up." She nodded. She took a deep breath and steadied herself, giving him a smile, a real if hurting smile. "Come, Prince Arthas. You need to escort your friend to the ball." Arthur somehow made it through the evening, and so did Jaina, although Tyrannus kept giving him strange glances. He didn't want to tell his father, not yet. It was a strained and unhappy night, and at one point during a pause in the dancing, Arthas looked out at the blanket of white snow and the moon-silvered lake, and wondered why everything bad seemed to happen in winter. Foreshadowing. Lieutenant General Adelis Blackmore didn't look particularly happy to have this exclusive audience with King Tyrannus and Prince Arthas. In fact, he looked like he desperately would like to slink away unnoticed. So right there, we are seeing, we could have had all of these chapters earlier because Blackmore is still alive, but now we're tying it in, and I really like, this is again the fangirl in Christy Golden, I really like how she ties those other older lore books into her timeline. It's really cool. It does a really good service for the lore. But yeah, so Blackmore's still alive. The years had not been kind to him, neither physically nor in the hand fate had dealt him. Arthas recalled a handsome, rather dashing military commander who, while doubtless overfond of his drink, at least seemed able to keep the ravages of it at bay. No longer. Blackmore's hair was streaked with gray, he had put on weight, and his eyes were bloodshot. He was fortunately stone-cold sober. Had he showed up to this meeting intoxicated, Tyrannus, a firm believer in the need for moderation in all things, would have refused to see him. Blackmore was here today because he had messed up badly. Somehow the man's prized gladiator orc thrall had escaped Durnhold in a fire. Blackmore had tried to keep it quiet and conduct the search for the orc personally and on a small scale, but a secret as large as a massive green orc could not be contained forever. Once word had gotten out, rumors flew wildly, of course. It was a rival lord who had freed the orc, anxious to ensure winning in the rings. It was a jealous mistress, hoping to embarrass him. It was a clever band of orcs unaffected by the strange lethargy. No, it was Orgrim Doomhammer himself. It was dragons, infiltrating disguised as humans, who lit the place afire with only their breath. So we are near the end of the Lord of the Clans book we just finished. Arthas had thought Thrall exciting to watch in combat, but he recalled that even then the thought had crossed his mind whether it was wise to train and educate an orc. Yeah, because remember, there's a scene, I don't remember where. When information had come that Thrall was on the loose, Tyrannus had summoned Blackmore immediately for an accounting. I don't remember if that was... I think it maybe was at the beginning of Lord of the Clans when that happened. It was bad enough that you thought it a good idea to train an orc to fight in gladiatorial combat, Tyrannus began, but to train him in military strategy, to teach him to read, to write. I must ask, Lieutenant General, what in the light's name were you thinking? Arthas smothered a grin as Ellis Blackmore seemed to physically diminish right in front of his eyes. You assured me that the funds and materials went directly into stepping up security and that your pet orc was securely guarded, Tyrannus continued. And yet somehow he is out there instead of safely inside Durnhold. How is that possible? Blackmore frowned and rallied somewhat. It is certainly unfortunate that Thrall escaped. I'm sure you understand how I must feel. It was a hit on Blackmore's part. Tyrannus still smarted from the fact that Doomhammer had escaped from under his very nose, but it wasn't a particularly wise hit. Tyrannus frowned and continued. I hope this isn't part of some disturbing trend. The money is earned from the labor of the people, Lieutenant General. It goes toward keeping them safe. Do I need to send along a representative to ensure that the funds are properly distributed? No, that won't be necessary. I will account for every penny. Yes, said Tyrannus with deceptive mildness. You will. When Blackmore finally left, bowing obsequiously the whole way out, Tyrannus turned to his son. What are your thoughts on this situation? You saw Thrall in action. Arthas nodded. He wasn't at all like I imagined orcs to be. I mean, he was huge and fought fiercely, but it was obvious he was also intelligent and trained. Tyrannus stroked his beard, thinking, there are pockets of renegade orcs out there, some who might not have this lassitude that the ones we've imprisoned have demonstrated. If Thrall were to find them and teach them what he knows, it could be a very bad thing for us. I'm not familiar with that word, lassitude. I'll have to look it up, I guess. But I'm guessing it's similar to lethargy, a lackadaisical attitude, kind of that sort of thing. Arthas stood up straighter. This could be what he'd been looking for. I've been training hard with Uther, and he had been. Unable to properly explain to others and to himself why he had ended the relationship with Jaina, he'd thrown himself into his training. He'd fought for hours a day until his body ached, attempting to sufficiently exhaust himself so that he could get her face out of his mind. It had been what he'd wanted, hadn't it? She'd taken it well. So why was it he who lay awake at night, missing her warmth and presence with a pain that bordered on agony? He had even embraced her through 2 despised hours, spent in still silent meditation in an effort to distract himself. Maybe if he focused on fighting, on learning how to accept and channel and direct the light, he could get the hell over her. Over the girl he himself had broken up with. We could go looking for such orcs, find them before Thrall does. Taranis nodded. Uther has informed me of your dedication, and he's been impressed with your progress. He reached a decision. Very well, then. Go tell Uther and start preparing. It's time for your first taste of real battle. Arthas was hard put not to let out a whoop of excitement. He refrained, even in his delight, picking up on the pained, worried look on his father's face. Maybe, just maybe, killing rebellious greenskins would erase the memory of Jaina's stricken expression when he'd ended their relationship. Thank you, sir. I'll do you proud. Despite the regret in his father's blue-green eyes, so like Arthas' own, Taranis smiled. That, my son, is the least of my worries. Yeah, I guess it should be. Yeah, so that's unfortunate, and it just goes to the deeply flawed, pathologically flawed nature of Arthas, that the most positive thing in his life, the thing that makes him better, because there are moments where you definitely get this sense that Jaina is helping him circumvent those moments of jealousy and negativity and doubt that he has by being stronger than him, really. And she is, even in this breakup, she is a stronger character than he is, which is why she stays a hero, and he falls into darkness. But yeah, like, that was a key moment. There are these, and I think that's what's important, you know. And I might be reading over into this, but I don't think it's a stretch to say that this book is serving as an expose on the milestones, the key junctures, the critical decision paths that lead from Arthas, a young boy, a blank slate with a healthy family, to becoming one of the most destructive and evil forces in this entire universe, the Warcraft universe. And that's what is really good about Warcraft, and why it's had the staying power, is they make their characters, they even make their villains, they humanize them. So I think that in the first chapter, the major beat was the death of Invincible. That was a key crux of his ultimate fall. The second is his decision to break up with Jaina. She could have carried him, and I can speak firsthand in the power of a strong woman being able to make you into a better person. And I'm sure, I'm not, you know, it's not magical about the woman or the male sex. I'm sure it goes both ways. A strong man could help make a woman better, you know. But I can definitely speak to that, and gaining strength from a partner and being better than the sum of your parts together. And he could have had that, but they're young. So in a rash move of self-destruction and fear, he just severs himself from that. And she's young, he's young, they don't have the ties. A lot of the times, we all do these self-destructive things, but a lot of the times there's either maturity, or there's experience, or there's the shackles, the burdens, the complexities of life. Things like children, pets, a mortgage. Those things make you more reluctant to make rash decisions, and when you're young, you don't have them, which is partly why young people do such things. And that's not to say that you're settling, but it's just like when they say don't write an email like when you're pissed, or write it, read it, delete it, and if you still feel the same way or whatever in a couple days, then you can reflect on it. It's the same kind of concept. But anyway, this is good. I think I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. This is the best book that we've read out of all these Warcraft books. I'm really into it. It might also just be that the way it's written, we're pacing ourselves and we just get so little, we can visit it from time to time. But I've really thoroughly enjoyed it so far. Hopefully you have too. This episode's in the pipe 5x5, and I will see everybody next time on Lore of Warcraft. Thanks guys so much for watching and listening.